Hi students, welcome to the BYJU'S Hindu News Analysis for 9th October 2018. So let's get started. So let's look into the topics that we will be having the discussion for the day. So these are the topics that we will be discussing. One is to do with the Supreme Court tax Tripura NRC, India faces threat of deadly heat waves, exotic birds, animals seized in Chennai, an editorial that is to do with the link between the disasters as well as the diaspora's help during the term, India to be the 11th wealthiest says BCG. Then we will end it up with the prelims practice questions as well as the main space questions. However, there are certain other topics that are also important in the newspaper today, and that was to do with the Zika virus and the exodus of the Gujarat workers, that is people who have been there living in Gujarat and now they are pushed off from Gujarat and moving towards UP as well as Bihar. And then there is NRC, then there is Sabrimala issue, and then there is the Bru tribe issue. All this have been discussed in the previous classes, so that is why we are not dealing with it. However, you should have a fair bit of an idea of all these important articles, but for now we will restrict ourselves to these articles which are something new for the day. So let's get started. So let's look into the first article. So the first article says Supreme Court tax Tripura NRC plea with the Assam case. So what is the crux of the discussion? So the crux of the discussion is with reference to the National Register of Citizens. So we know for the fact that National Register of Citizens has been used for a very long time, and this is in reference to one of the states, and that is to do with the state of Assam, and this is basically dealing with the illegal immigration. And because there is a large scale illegal immigration that is happening from Bangladesh towards India, this has become a major security threat, and this has become a cultural feud between those people who are originally there and those people who have illegally migrated, and that is why there is NRC that is being taken place in the Assam. However, what we need to consider in this context is that the Supreme Court has issued one of the notices to the government that there was one of the public interest litigation filed by one of the persons from the Tripura, and it has detected that the same issue is happening even in Tripura apart from Assam. So what it has done is it has actually tagged the Tripura NRC issue with the same case that is to do with the Assam case. So let's try and understand what are the various arguments that have been put forward with respect to the Tripura. So when you look into the petition, what this petition basically goes on to say is that Supreme Court has to direct the authorities to update the NRC with respect to Tripura in terms of rules 3 or 4 of the citizenship rules by taking July 1948 as the cutoff date as provided in the Article 6 of the Constitution. So any person, in case that is any illegal immigrant who does not have the relevant documents, he does not have those documents to prove his identity with respect to India, in case he has come to Tripura after July 1948, then these people should be considered as illegal immigrants, is what this article goes on to say. Further, it has said the petition contended the influx of illegal immigrants into Tripura amounted to external aggression under the Article 355 of the Constitution. Now the question that immediately pops up is, what is this external aggression all about? What is its reference to Article 355 of the Indian Constitution? So we know for the fact that the central government is bound to control the state government from the external aggression. So what is the external aggression here? So the external aggression that we will have to implicitly assume is that when there are large number of people who are illegal immigrants, this could possibly be a security threat, and when there is security threat that is brewing in this atmosphere, what this can lead to is a sovereignty issue. Why? Because of all these people there will be change in the demographic dividend, and when there is change in the demographic dividend, those people who are originally there will have a threat. And who is the responsibility of it? The central government. So the central government should take the responsibility here to protect the state government. So what it has said is these illegal immigrants could be a security threat. So because they could be a security threat, what it has said is, you the central government, please make sure that we the state people are protected from all these illegal immigrants, because when there is demographic change, this could obviously lead to changes, and this can possibly have a security issue. So please protect is what it goes on to say. Further it says the presence of illegal immigrants violates the political rights of the citizens of the Tripura. So what would happen in this particular case? So this is basically going in reference to the voting pattern. So what do we mean by it? Let's say for example there are large number of illegal immigrants. So these illegal immigrants come down and settle down in this particular place. So with time they'll get their ration cards, they'll get their voter IDs, they'll use all the subsidies that is meant for the citizens of India. However, these illegal immigrants are not the citizens of India, and with time, because they also have the voter ID, they can establish a political party which is in reference to their ideology, in reference to their whims, but which is not in terms with the Indian citizens. So what could be the resultant? So we will have an alien political party being established, and this will dictate the terms and conditions. So what it says is that the presence of illegal immigrants violates the political rights. Why? Because there could be a new political party which can go against the wishes of those people who are original inhabitants. So because of all this, what it says is please make sure the presence of illegal immigrants is completely neutralized in this particular case. And the third thing it goes on to say is uncontrolled influx of illegal immigrants from Bangladesh has caused huge demographic changes in Tripura. So Tripura was predominantly a tribal state, but now it has become a non-tribal state. That is, the indigenous people who were once the majority have now become a minority in their own land. So what is the cause of concern here? So the cause of concern with reference to this is the cultural aspect. So when we look into this aspect, what it says is any nation for that matter lives on a particular culture, and there is tribal culture. What is happening with respect to this particular case is when there is large scale illegal immigration, there is new culture that can start up, and when there is new culture there could be certain law and order issues because there is one culture which is hosted against the other. This can possibly lead to certain law and order issues, and this can have a problem where it is changing the entire demographic dividend. So what the Tripura petitioner has said is all this could be the possible issues. So kindly make sure that you bring about changes with respect to Tripura as well as same as what is happening in Assam. However, we will not be going in deep with respect to NRC because time and again we have repeated and we have also had discussions with NRC. So let's restrict ourselves to only Tripura with respect to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says India faces threat of deadly heat wave, says the UN climate report. So let's look into the context. So when you look into the context, what it says is if the average global temperature rises by more than 1 degree Celsius by the present, India could annually expect conditions like the 2015 heat wave that killed at least 2000, and this is in reference to one of the reports, and that is the special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is commissioned by the IPCC. So what it goes on to say is that the Indian subcontinent would face a lot of trouble because of the growing climate change, and when there is increase in the temperature, what it can create is a large scale devastation, and what is to do with the heat waves is what it goes on to say. In specific, what it goes on to say is that there are certain important places, let's say for example Kolkata, and also in the Indian subcontinent there are places like Karachi. This could place a large scale problems because of the heat waves. So what it says is that the Indian continent, according to the IPCC report, specifically mentions these two places, that is Karachi as well as Kolkata, that this could face a grave threat because of the heat wave. So what it further goes on to say is this will have a large scale impact. So what is the impact that it is speaking about? Let's say for example this will lead to a large scale vector borne diseases. So due to increase in the temperature, what we will see is the increase in the vector borne diseases. Why? Because this will give rise to a lot of mosquitoes, and because we would not be able to take them on because of the resistance that it has already built, what we will see is the vector borne diseases due to mosquitoes like the malaria as well as dengue. So this is one of the health impacts that can rise to. And apart from this, what we can also see is poverty issues. What will happen in this particular cases, because there is large scale heat waves that are stuck this particular area, this could lead to large scale migration, and when there is migration, they'll obviously have to leave their hometown, they'll have to leave their lands, and when there is this migration that is happening from the rural areas to the urban areas, what this could result is in the food insecurity. So because there is large scale migration, the major problem that we will see is with reference to the food security issue. There will be higher food prices. Why? Because these people have moved from the rural areas to the urban areas, or those places which has large scale impact of heat devastation, they'll be moving from these areas to the much better areas. So there is large scale migration. This will obviously result in higher food prices, and this will also result in income losses. Why income losses? Because they are leaving their hometowns, because they are leaving their lands, because they are leaving their livestock, and they are moving to a new area, and because there is loss of incomes in this particular case, this can impact their livelihood, and also there will be large scale population displacement. This is what it says is a major impact of this particular program. So what are the concerns it voices? So there are n number of concerns that this article goes on to speak about. One of the important concerns that it voices is that there are important developed countries. So these developed countries with time have developed during the industrial revolution, and now it becomes imperative for these developed countries to take up certain moral obligations. Why moral obligations? It is these people who have developed at the cost of the climate. So they have made sure that the climate is utilized properly during the industrial revolution, and now it becomes very important to have a moral obligation to support the developing countries so that they don't face the devastation of climate change. However, what the concern that is voiced in this particular case is that US is obviously withdrawn from the accord, and when it is withdrawn, this is one of the major developed countries. It had promised that it would be giving certain technological advancements, it would be giving certain funding, but now what is the problem? One we will face is the funding problem, and the next issue that we will face is in terms of the technology. So when the technology that was supposed to be provided by the developed countries is not provided, the funding that was supposed to be provided by the developed countries is not provided, where will the developed countries grow is the question that is being asked. And apart from this, what we also need to consider is there are a number of other technologies. Let's say for example the carbon capture and the storage. So these carbon capture as well as storage, which has worked at the minuscule level, can be an important thing, but the problem we are facing is that these carbon capture and storage facilities that have been used at the minuscule level has proved insignificant at the global scale level. So the three concerns it voices is one on the funding front, then on the technology front, and as well as the technology which is used here in terms of already established ones, is it going to prove a better one in case of the future, is what is being asked in this particular case. So what are the steps that are supposed to be taken? So what this article goes on to state is that in order to make sure that this temperature is restricted within 1.5 degrees centigrade, what we need to make sure is we need a multi-stakeholder approach. This can happen only when all society come together. It should not be only that the government is taking precedence into it. It is not that only the private is taking precedence into it. It is not that the civil society should take part in it. All systems should come up together. So what we need is number of technologies, that is transitions in terms of the land, the energy, the industry, the building, the transport, as well as activities. So what it says is, the first point it goes on to say is we need a multi-stakeholder approach where it involves transitions in all fields, that involves the land, the energy, the industry, the buildings, the transport, as well as the cities. And apart from this, it further goes on to say that the carbon dioxide emissions that we are currently increasing due to fuel should also be controlled. That is, the remaining emissions as well as the human emissions that have been taking place every now and then should obviously be removed from the air, is the second point that it makes. And also what it ends up with is the rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes in all aspects of the society will require everyone contributing to this particular program, and what we will need is a multi-stakeholder approach where every person in the society will have to play its part so that we can actually reduce this particular pollution, is what it says. So moving on, let's look into the third article. So the third article says exotic birds animals seized in Chennai. So what is the context? So when we look into the context, it says sleuths of Directorate of Revenue Intelligence rescued 70 birds of exotic species and animals from a residential premises in the city and from a farmhouse on the outskirts of the city. So what is important is we have to understand what are the various laws that actually prevent exotic birds from being used by other people. So the first point that we have to realize in this particular case is there is a mention of red-tailed black cockatoo, and the IUCN status of this is least concern. So this becomes a very important point from the prelims examination. So kindly remember it because it has had a mention of it. That's why we are having a discussion. So moving on, first let's discuss what are the various laws. So when we look into the various laws, right, the most important laws that we have to consider in this particular case is the CITES. So what does the CITES stands for? It basically stands for the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. This also has another name. This can also be a likely question in prelims, and this is called as the Washington Convention. So kindly remember these two names. So the laws that is dealing with all these exotic birds as well as animals is dealing with CITES law, and then this also has another name which is called as Washington Convention. So what is the aim of this CITES basically is? So basically what it goes on to do is any international trade with respect to any plant or an animal which threatens the survival of that plant or an animal should be completely restricted. So one of the basic Washington Convention says is in case it is going on to become extinct or it is going to be a survival issue, then such plants or such animals will have to be restricted. That is, the migration of this should be completely restricted is what this CITES basically goes on to say. So what it has further has is there are basically three important appendix. So when we understand the appendix, we will understand it in a much better way. So there are three forms in the appendix. First you have is the appendix 1, and the appendix 1 basically has about 1200 species, and this involves all those which are in the extinction. So the appendix 1 basically involves about 1200 species, and in case there are species, that is the plants and animals that are threatened with extinction or may be affected by trade, then such things should be completely restricted except for in the exceptional conditions. Let's say for example the exception conditions here may involve R&D or it may involve further reproductive process. So in such case then it would be able to provide permission. And the second appendix it goes on to speak about is appendix 2, and this involves almost about 21,000 species. These are not threatened, but in case they are not controlled and in case they are not subjected to serious and strict regulation, then they could possibly form in the bid of extinction. So what appendix 2 says is that currently when you look into all these plants and animals, they are currently not threatened. However, in case we are not able to sustain this momentum, in case we are not able to have strict regulations, then what we will see is this particular plant or animal entering the extinction phase. So in order to avoid this utilization incompatible with the survival of the species, that is why it is placed in the appendix 2. And the third thing is we have what is called as appendix 3, and there are about 170 species in the appendix 3. So what is important in this particular case is these are not threatened or these are not in extinction. However, let's say any country there is a grave threat to that particular plant or animal, and it requests that this particular plant or animal has to be faced in appendix 3. So on a request of this particular country, such plants or animals will be placed in this particular appendix. So what will require in this particular case is in case there is a movement or a migration or there is trade that has supposed to be done with respect to all this, what you will require is a certification. So with respect to all these animals, plants, birds and whatsoever, in case there is movement of all these animals, plants as well as different birds, what you require is a certification. In case there is no certification, in case there is no permission that is granted in this by a host country according to appendix 1, 2 and 3, then such things will fall under illegal trade. So the most important point that we have to understand is, for all this, that is the ones which are placed in appendix 1, appendix 2 as well as appendix 3, in case you are moving it from one region to another, this will require certification or a permit from the host country that we are letting this plant or animal to a new region. In case there is no certification that is provided, then it is illegal, is what this law goes on to speak. And apart from this, what we also see is a number of Indian laws. Let's say, for example, the Wildlife Protection Act. So you have the Wildlife Protection Act of the 1972, and then you have the Customs Act. Then we also have foreign trade policy. All this also manages with respect to the exotic birds and animals. So these are the basic number of laws that we need to understand with respect to the particular seizure. However, what we will also have to understand is the penalty. So in case people are actually caught with respect to this, what we have to understand in this case is that they would be penalized under the Customs Act of the 1962, and this could lead to imprisonment of about 7 years and also along with fine. So these are the number of laws that we will have to understand with respect to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says the diaspora and the disasters. So we have seen n number of articles that we have discussed with respect to the Kerala floods. What are the reasons? What are the geological reasons? What are the various other reasons with respect to the natural phenomena as well as the environmental damage? But what we will be discussing in this article are on the two fronts. On one front, we are discussing is the diaspora's involvement when it comes to the Kerala floods. What are the important factors that they added in helping curbing this particular issue, and at the same time the economical acts with respect to the diaspora. All this will be discussed with reference to this article. So what we will have to understand here is, we will have to understand here on two fronts. So what we know for the fact is, on the first front, what we will have to understand is in terms of the economy. So what do we mean by it? We know for the fact Kerala actually believes in what is called as the remittance based economy. So what do we mean by it? Majority of the Kerala are the people who are living in the abroad countries. For example, in the West Asia, they are maybe living in all the Middle Asian countries, and these people who are working for their own people, their families, their friends, are living in those areas, and they are sending the money in order to take care of their people. So when we say remittance based economy, it is that economy which has the maximum amount of its government fundings, that is from the remittances. When you look into the statistics, almost 33% of the Kerala's GDP comes from the remittance based economy. So that is why it is called as one of the states which is heavily based on the remittances that is coming from another country into the home country. So when we speak of the economic front, what we will have to understand is that the Indian diaspora is situated everywhere. So you have it in the United States of America, you have it in the Europe, in the United Kingdom, and also in the West Asia. So what we can effectively make use of is the depreciation process. So currently what we have is the Indian economy going in doldrums. Why? Because of the global impact and because of the global connection. What we see is India's currency is going down every alternate day. Indian's currency is depreciated almost up to 70 rupees per dollar. So in order to overcome this issue, what we should be able to use is the diaspora. How is that we are making use of the diaspora? So we are requesting the diaspora or the Indian people who have settled abroad to actually spend more or send more money to India. That is what is the major important in terms of limiting this depreciation. So what we will have to understand is, there have been number of instances in the past. So let's say, for example, in the year 1998. So in the year 1998, what we see was one of the programs that was taken care by the government, and that is called as the Resurgent India bonds. So what is this program all about? So in the year 1998, what we saw was India had a Pokhran issue, and when we had Pokhran issue, there was large scale sanctions that was sanctioned by United States of America and multiple other countries. So India did not have much of currency basket back then. So what did India do? India came up with bonds which is called as the Resurgent India bonds. Basically it raised about $5 billion during this period. Why did it raise? Because we had sanctions, because we went up with a nuclear program. So but India wanted currency in the form of dollars, so India came up with this particular proposal, that is Resurgent India bonds, which was during the Pokhran. So back then India did receive a lot of funds, India did get a lot of funds, and the rupee appreciated. And on the second instance, what we have to understand is during the period of 2000, and during this period India came up with a program called as India Millennium Deposits. So again India saw a large scale problems with respect to its currency, and that is why it came up and opened up its India Millennium Deposits, again to ask the diaspora to please invest and get some money from the outside countries to the Indian markets. And the third important program happened during the year of 2013, and that was that called as FCRN of B, which was something to do with the US Fed. So what is important in this particular case is, in all these three situations, whether it was in 1998, whether it was in 2000, or whether it was in 2013, what was important was it was the diaspora which helped the Indian currency, which was depreciating, to comparatively appreciate. So what this article goes on to say is, we can make use of the Indian diaspora to effectively manage the economy and make sure that Indian currency, which is comparatively depreciating every alternate day, can be comparatively boosted up. How? In order by using the diaspora and raising up certain bonds, so that there is income that is generated through the remittances, and India would be able to fight this menace of depreciation, is one set of arguments. And at the other side, what it further goes on to speak is in terms of the disaster. So what does it say? So it says that whenever there is diaspora, what you can see is they engage with the number of migrants, and then these migrants who are situated abroad, what they'll do is they'll have a large scale impact with respect to the disaster management. Is that there are n number of countries, let's say for example the Haiti or the Nepal during the 2015 earthquake, or when the tsunami struck in 2004, or during the Pakistan earthquake, the diaspora who were situated in other countries played a major part. How did they play a major part? One, they started sending a lot of money. They were able to coordinate with respect to people. They were able to bring up new set of technologies. So what we see in this particular case is, in spite of presence of these people, not in India but in some other country, what we see is the coordination. So they are able to coordinate amongst themselves, bring about new technology, so that they would be able to assist their home people during the time of crisis. Some of the examples that they go on to give in this particular cases, there was a large scale doctors, nurses, engineers, educators, advisors, reconstruction planners in number of situations earlier, who have worked amongst themselves, coordinated amongst themselves, and brought about change, and were able to address the crisis at the period of pain and grief. And at the same time, what it further goes on to say is, so because they are able to coordinate at the larger scale, what we need to make sure is, in case of any disaster that strikes in the future, what we will need is the diaspora's help, who would be able to mobilize resources, get all the talent that is important, and integrate the knowledge from all domains, so that it becomes an integral part in rebuilding the whole state, is what this article all about. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says, India to be the 11th wealthiest, says BCG. So what is the context about? So the context is with reference to one of the reports, that is the Global Wealth 2018 Seizing the Analytics Advantage, which was released by the Boston Consultancy Group. So what we will have to initially understand is that there are three categories of people that this particular article goes on to speak about. So what are the three categories of people? One is the ultra high net worth. So any person or an individual whose wealth is in excess of $100 million, such people will be falling under this particular category. So the major category to define this people is the money income, and that is $100 million. And the second important point is the high net worth. So these individuals whose range is in between $1 million, $100 million fall under this particular high net worth individuals. And apart from this, what we also have is affluent. So who are the affluent individuals? Anyone whose income is more than 1 million, these people will be falling under this particular issue. So these are the various categories that this particular article goes on to define. So what we now need to understand is that India is actually pictured in one of the important countries that the number of high assets individuals with respect to India has comparatively increased. So what it goes on to say is, according to the report, India is currently the 5th largest Asian market in terms of the number of affluent, high net worth and ultra net worth individuals, and the total number of people which are pegged in this particular case is 4.13 lakh in this case. So what we have to understand in this case is that India is currently the 5th largest when it comes to the Asia, and apart from this, in terms of the emerging economies, what we see is first it is occupied by China, and when it comes to the emerging economies, India is occupying a second place. So this is something factual that we have to remember when it comes to the prelims perspective. And when it comes to the world perspective, what we have to understand in this particular case is the first place is occupied by USA, and then what we have is China. So currently when you look into the statistics about the countries, the total personal wealth of all the individuals in USA is mounting up to about $80 trillion, and this is according to 2017. And when we look into China, this is currently mounting up to $21 trillion. So currently what we see is United States of America occupying the first position, and then China occupying the second position, and this with reference to India is about $3 trillion. And further, what this article goes on to say is, further in terms of the asset classes, almost 60% of the 121.6 trillion of the global wealth was in the form of investable assets such as the equity, the investment funds, the currency, the deposits as well as bonds, with the remaining 40% or 80.3 trillion in low liquidity assets such as life insurance, pension funds and equity. So this is basically from the prelims perspective. So kindly remember these facts, that is all is important from this article. So moving on, let's look into the next one, and that is to do with the prelims practice question. So the first question says, consider the following statements regarding the military exercises. First one, Cobra Gold, India, China, Ukraine, India, Maldives, Hakimahu Shakti, India, Singapore, Lamitia, India, Seychelles, Maitri, India and Thailand. So which of the following are incorrect is what the question is all about. So which are the incorrect ones? So the incorrect ones here are Cobra Gold, which is India and China, as well as Harimau Shakti, that is India and Singapore. So these two are the wrong ones. Why? Because Harimau Shakti is to do with India as well as Malaysia, and Cobra Gold is not to do with India and China. It is to do with Asia Pacific military exercise, which involves Thailand as well as USA and other countries. So what is the correct option? It is B in this particular case, because only 1 and 3 is the incorrect statement. And moving on, let's look into the second question. So the second question says, consider the following statements regarding the coffee club. Italy, Brazil, Mexico and Sri Lanka in 1995 founded the coffee club. It aims to counter the bids for permanent seats proposed by G4 nations. Select the correct answer during the given below. So the correct answer in this particular case is only 2. That is option B is the correct one. So why is it? Let's look in and discuss it. So it is not those countries, but instead it is Italy, Pakistan, Mexico and Egypt which founded coffee club in the year 1995, which was developed in 1990s in opposition to the possible expansion of the permanent seats in the UNSC. So this, under the leadership of the Italy, aims to counter the bids of the permanent seats proposed by the G4 nations, that is Brazil, Germany, India and Japan, and is calling for a consensus based any decision is reached on the form and size of the Security Council. So what is the thing here? It is the Italy, Mexico, Pakistan and Egypt in this particular case, and not Sri Lanka. This is what we need to understand. And moving on, let's look into the next one, that is the mains based question. It says the energy drinks that are consumed are not only doses of high energy but a path to increased health hazard. Comment. So next question is, what is soft power? How is it different from hard power? Illustrate with examples. So please write all your answers on the comment section so that we can evaluate and also have a peer review, and like a particular comment in case you feel that the answer is good. So this is it for today. Thank you so much. All the best.